Oh, that's my bad. There we go. I knew I was forgetting something. All right, welcome back to Rise to Liberty podcast. This morning I am joined by Shane Hazel. How you doing, Shane?
Good, brother. Thanks for having me in. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. We tried to get you on a while ago, and everything just kind of didn't quite work out, and so I'm glad to finally get you on.
Yeah, no, it's always a pleasure to be on somebody's platform, man, and I appreciate you giving me this place to come in here and talk.
Anytime, anytime. I do got to say I am kind of glad we waited until after that amazing Georgia debate that you had, which was like I I watch clips from it every now and then. I think that should be the like minimum for any libertarian election.
Oh man, the minimum, yeah, that'd be great, wouldn't it? It's like,
Yeah,
well, yeah. I mean, getting anybody to have you in on a debate is tough to begin with, right? And
yeah,
the way they do this and they set it up, it's not like, oh yeah, come on in, libertarians. It's one of those things where even when they do it, they're using you as a prop and trying to show how fair they are, while at the same time excluding you from the conversation by asking questions of the Democrat and the Republican, trying to get them to attack each other so that they can rebuttal and take up the entire hour without mentioning you at all. So
yeah.
it's there's a lot of hijinks that goes on, but even before the whole thing. I mean, where you're not even given a green room like the other two, you're just given a sound stage that's empty as hell, and like, all right, here you go. And so it's definitely an experience. I think my past experience with that specific debate helped me out a lot. That was my third one, so I kind of really understood the format, and I had, in my mind, it was just, let's go. You've done this two other times, so
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun.
Well, I absolutely loved it, especially there was a few times they were trying to say, "All right, Mr. Hazel, your turn is done," and you just kept rolling, and you were just like, "Nope, I'm gonna finish saying what I'm saying, and then I'll be done."
Yeah, as much as I think most people can't stand Donald Trump, he does something very well on a debate stage, right? He's chaos. And it's not so much that he's chaos in a good way. He's, obviously he's the furthest thing from libertarian possible.
Yeah,
But he commands a stage, and when he's there, he's not going to let anybody push him around. And I think, if you're that guy that's going out for the executive position, that's probably a quality that's right up there with being the executive of a state, let alone a nation. Is, if people are going to push you around, being moderators or the opponent, then you're probably not the right person for the job. And creating that disruption, calling people out, making them uncomfortable, making them, make mistakes and have gaffes and hiccups in their speech and everything else. That's the name of the game. Make them look like the children they are.
and I think you did that just beautifully.
Like,
Honestly, it's one of the highlights of this last election cycle, in my opinion. It was like your debate and Jeremy Kaufman's messaging coming out of New Hampshire, I think, were like the two highlights across the country. That was just, it put a smile on my face. I was like, finally, there's some awesome messaging coming out.
how much fun was Jeremy Coffin, man? I like
Oh, I
that
loved
was
it.
just such a, I mean, it's brilliant, right? Like
Yeah,
just a brilliant way to have some fun, make some people laugh, take notice at the same time, and absolutely deliver on message.
yeah,
We kind of talked before the show, is you got to go on offense. I mean, it's way late in the ball game, playing
oh yeah,
defense, trying to get along, being accepted into the this is no. We are watching the empire collapse right now, and to help people understand that, to show people that there are already people that are out in front of us, people that they can join with, to recognize this, push it, and then decentralize it at their local level. That's the most beautiful part of a lot of what Jeremy did. He's like, oh yeah, let's
Yeah.
let's call out the absurd and the ridiculous for what it is, and show people like, hey, these are the people that actually make a lot of sense, and they're still fighting. It's just they're not fighting at the national level because there's no incentive.
I just got to say I'm excited to see actual libertarians again. Just
Yeah, it's been a while, man. I mean, once the Ron Paul era was kind of over for us, after 2012, Gary, he's a nice enough guy.
milk
Um,
toast.
but yeah, he's not hard, man. He's not the brass knuckle, and he's definitely not. He wasn't fun. Like Gary wasn't that fun, guy that was going out there and taking shots and just absolutely delivering a very unapologetic. And that's the thing, is being unapologetic about liberty and freedom, and absolutely being on the offense, calling out force and coercion everywhere you see it. Like that wasn't Gary Johnson. That was not the LP prior to the Mises Caucus. And you've seen the
Yeah.
change. Like you've seen the change since the
Oh
Mises
yeah.
Caucus has taken over. And love them or hate them, whatever your feelings are, they have done some really amazing things since their I think May, April, whenever the heck it was, when they
Yeah.
were out in Reno. Yeah, man, like hats off to them.
Oh, so I was so proud to be a part of that whole thing. I'm Mises, and it's not something I like to flaunt. It's a choice I made for myself, and I usually do the work behind the scenes with Mises. But I'm proud as hell of
Yeah.
being a part of all of that.
Well, and here's the thing is, we've been called a lot of things, and I will tell you down in Georgia, like the people that I would go out, I would be asked to come out and speak at, Joe Jorgensen events, or, Angela Pence or whoever, like, and
Yeah.
I'd show up and I'd help them out gladly, with a smile on my face, no animosity whatsoever. Hey, thanks for giving me a stage to come out here and talk a little bit. And thanks for, putting on these events and getting after it. And as soon as the Mises Caucus won, the 180 degrees, like the whole Nazi rhetoric, the white supremacist not rhetoric, like all this nonsense from the same people that asked us to come out and support them. And that's the thing is, I right before the Mises Caucus thing happened, I've been down at the Bitcoin conference in Miami, and this was in between back surgeries. I was feeling good. Ran into some of these same people, including Joe's camp down there, and they asked me to come to a breakfast. And I was like, you know what? Sure, we're here for Bitcoin. This is a great avenue to put away a lot of silly differences and come down and support her again. And like this is not my first time coming out and supporting Joe's little event. So I was like, sure, why not? Let's go. And the people that put it on between then and right after the Mises Caucus takeover, man, they were just like, screw you, and you guys are the worst people ever. And you're like, "Oh, you can't have it both ways. You've asked us to come out, you've asked us for support, and now you're going to sit there and say, oh, we're white supremacists, or foster a culture of hate. No, we don't. We're just hard line, and we tell the truth. And it's one of those things where when people come out and they're called out on their bullshit, or their soft hands, or their lackluster performances, it's there's nothing to that except for trying to improve where we're at as libertarians, because let's face it, the mainstream's not going to help us, the banks aren't going to help us, the political elite aren't going to help us. They're never ever going to open the door for us, and you've got to be those people that fight and gain attention through making headlines. And between the New Hampshire guys up there, and down here in Georgia and Tennessee and Kentucky, and you guys out in Utah now, like this is like you can see the bastions where the Mises Caucus is in control, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it's honestly great. I always made the joke that if we were white supremacists, we would have been in power by now. you know, like it doesn't make sense. Like if we're white supremacists, we're the worst ones
Yeah,
ever in history. So I
it's
hate it. It's
it's
lame
crazy.
messaging, and you're like going after like low hanging fruit on the messaging pole. It's like, at least be creative if you're going to criticize us.
Yeah, it's right up there with the left, and then not kind of the left, like the really progressive,
Yeah.
thoughtless, brainless, unstudied left. Oh, you're racist, you're sexist, you're haters. No, we're not. We're just a little more hard nosed than you guys are, and that offends some people. It scares some people off. But this is the time for fighters, and
Yeah.
that's the one thing I think, I took away from everything is like we were looking for fighters. We were looking for people that had not only the acumen to sit there and talk about, Austrian economics, and understand the banking cycles and all that kind of stuff of the Keynesians, but really go in there very brashly, we chest out, puffy as hell, and give it to
Yeah.
these guys both barrels. And that's the thing is if you're going to snuggle up to the political elite and try to make friends, man, those people they're snakes. As soon as you turn around, they're going to stab you in the back, they'll stab you in the front, they'll stab you any way they can, and they'll use you for political fodder. And I think it's long past time the Libertarian Party stop being used for fodder and start getting back to our voluntary, in terms of branding, voluntary type of roots. You could say anarchy, but that scares a lot of people. But voluntary is just that term that we use on a daily basis. Is just like, hey, listen, we can have consentful relationships, and that includes the government. It's just you guys, man, you guys are making concessions and retreating and in the face of the monster. And so on the other end of that, you're pushing towards the decentralization and the end of an empire, which makes us all freer.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. So one thing I kind of want to get into is just like your start of being a libertarian. You're a Marine combat veteran,
Mhm.
and from everything I understand, you kind of had like an awakening during your military experience. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, hard not to see. My first tour, you see some things in the first tour, right? And like my first tour was the original invasion. We were in Kuwait, and we went into Iraq in mid March, right around my brother's birthday. I think it was the 18th. And you see the highway of death from like the early 90s. The highway of death is what leads, from Baghdad down to Kuwait, and it was just, I mean, still, truck holes and cars and you know uh not too many skeletons or anything like that left, but occasionally you see some bones. And I mean, this went on for miles and miles and miles. So you start to see, a lot of people were trying to get the hell out of desert, out of Iraq, the first time we went down there, and it was a pretty gruesome sight. Then in I guess, we turned around after, taking Baghdad. I mean, we went all the way up to Crit and got sent back home a little bit early, even earlier than the rest of our company, to be the next platoon to head back over. And so when we headed back over in April of 2004, Fallujah 1 was kicking off at that time, and we were watching, guys in t-shirts with saws, squad automatic weapons. It's a 249, and just guys on rooftops just shooting it out. And they pulled back. We got into this place called Najaf, in July, and when we got there, as soon as the Marines took over from the Army, we picked a fight with Muqtada al-Sadr, and his Mahdi militia, which were Shiite, which I thought is who we were there to help with. And we had surrounded the Mahdi militia in this place called the Imam Ali Shrine, the second holiest site in all of Islam. And as we're getting ready to drop a whole bunch of guided bomb units, GBUs, on this place, they were like, no, they've brokered a deal. The Grand Ayatollah Sistani, Muqtada al-Sadr, and some of the bigwigs in DC brokered a deal. We had to watch everybody walk away, and that was a really, like, that was a moment of pause. You were like, what are we doing here? If we're going to fight these guys and corner them, and the goal is to wipe terror off the mat. And this is when I was still very much a young, very
Yeah.
red, white, and blue spangly guy. I was like, man, well, we just missed the opportunity to do that. And those guys are going to go out there and do what? You think they're going to, kumbaya it up, and we're going to
Yeah,
join our?
they're done
No,
now.
yeah. So that was kind of the first eye-opening event. And then not much later, after we got done helping out with ODA, which is Operational Detachment Alpha from the Green Berets, down there in Najaf, we went up to Fallujah and we did all the battlefield reconnaissance for the breach points and all that fun stuff for the better part of a couple weeks, out every night trying to take a look at, where would be a good point to breach the city. And then we got pulled in as combat replacements for 3-1, 1-3, and 1-8 battalions that were out there that were taking heavy losses. So, our guys, and I was 24 at the time, I was an old man compared to these kids, 17, 18 years old, kicking indoors. I was also the point man in a breach team. So, making sure that, showing these guys how this is done, taking point on house after house after house, getting shot at, getting fragged, you name it. It was pretty terrible situation. And then just to see the destruction, I mean, the death and destruction that was going on there. I mean, bodies all everywhere, like really, like just left out in the street, dogs that were, wild, and this is maybe more of the gruesome part, but in these situations, you see dogs fighting over human bodies. And it's really, it's one of the most disturbing aspects of war you'll ever see. Not to mention, we went in there and destroyed an entire city. Close to the, I guess it was Thanksgiving. We headed back just to re-gear and restock everything. And on my rack, my bed in my tent was a book from one of my buddies who just got done reading. It was John Taylor Gatto's The Underground History of American Education. And Jesus, read that while you're in a war zone. I mean, it talks about the history of American education, where it came from in terms of 1700s Prussia. And the reason why it was instituted was to create more of a homogenous culture that was very ready to serve the state, especially when it was time to go off to war. And when you see that and you're overseas, man, you're just like, holy shit, they got me. They got me. I'm here right now. And I still had probably, I think, till the end of February. This
Wow.
was, late November. And I've got to go back outside the wire, not die, get everybody home. And Jesus Christ, man, like what a mind trip. It was just one of those things where you kind of put your head down, and your only goal at that point was like, I got to go, I got to get out. And I didn't know what a conscientious objector was at that point, or I probably would have become one. And to be honest, it was one of those things where over that course of those months, that book became the conversation of a lot of what we talked about in the platoon, and a lot of guys got out as soon as we got back. Like guys were finishing out their their sentence, their tour,
Yeah.
and so most of that platoon, if they weren't really long in the tooth, they left, and it was over. So yeah, that was my awakening, man. It was, I didn't know where to go. And that's the thing, is I had no idea until 2008. I'd been studying the Constitution, trying to get down to, what bedrock was, which the Constitution still wasn't bedrock. And I didn't know that at the time. There were these really great guys called the Anti-Federalists that fought this tooth and nail into their very poor and disgraced graves, unfortunately. And then I found Ron Paul, a little guy up there, big ass suit, talking about how, we have blowback, and the reason they hate us isn't our freedom. It's because we've been over there for decades and decades and decades doing, coups. And, obviously, if you go back in history and look at the first CIA coup against Mossadegh and in Iran with Operation Ajax, like you're just like, well, yeah, man, I kind of get why they might not like us very much. I kind of get why the strained history with Iran has really been one of those things where they hate us. And boy, golly, you install the Shah who gets run over, by some clerics because, he's failing. And now they've gone from a very, Western outlook, very, very free outlook, in a very rich nation. And now they're wearing, bed sheets and burqas. Luckily, I guess for them, they've joined BRICS now and are trying to join BRICS now. And a lot of this is starting to come apart. You see, there's a big movement in Iran, especially for the women, where they're going around without, the hijab and just walking around. And sometimes it's not meant very well, but I mean, what a bunch of brave people. It's not, I'm not talking about the government, screw
obviously.
the government, but yeah, really, really amazing people.
talk about real feminism, by the way. I mean, that that's amazing. When something that you do could be met with such hostility
Mhm.
from a large portion of society, and you do it anyways because you know it's right, and it's something that you feel you have the right to do. Man, it takes some real lady balls there, you know.
Yeah, I mean, they're still throwing people off of tops of buildings over there.
Yeah,
What a horrifying way to be killed, right? Like, "Oh, yeah,
yeah.
you could be thrown off the top of a building." Like, Jesus.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
that is
Meanwhile, we have safe spaces in colleges.
yeah, true feminism for sure. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So so as somebody who's actually lived through the shit, how do you feel like when you see pro-war Republicans? Especially because most of these people have never been over there. They've never seen the horrors of war. And how do you feel about those people and how do you usually address them?
Depends on who they are. If it's, if it's a McCain, then, obviously gloves are off, because you've got so much power and the correction has to be swift. Um, when I see other, pro-war Republicans, like as libertarians, we're not very good at this. We're not very good at being empathetic, right? Once upon a time, being one of them, one of these people that was indoctrinated by the state, and this is right back to John Taylor Gatto. A lot of times, what I do is try to introduce them to John Taylor Gatto specifically, like, hey, you need to read this book and maybe understand, like, coming from a guy that did all this kind of stuff. It's not that I am, when the time comes for, just war, for defense, when the tyranny has become too great. Yes, 100%. Um, but outside of that, there's no good reason for us to be around the world and over 120 bases, to be deployed, to be laundering money in these situations and propping up this, this god awful MIC, which is, the Raytheons and the fucking Boeings and Lockheeds and you name it, like all these really gross, incompetent organizations that are just full of fucking criminals. Like it is it's one of those things where it's hard to restrain yourself, but you're never going to win anybody to our argument by like, "Hey, you dumb fuck." I mean, maybe once in a while, right?
Yeah.
But more or less, it's me telling stories, right? It's me telling that story. It's me having these heart to hearts with people. It just plants a seed because until they want to see it, until they want to learn, until they want to study and get down to the bottom of this, what you're doing is you're threatening their worldview, their construct, this thing that they've kind of fell back into. And I'll tell you right now, for anybody that it was never a GOP baby or any of those kind of things, right? There's something very powerful and very snuggly about the I don't know, the MIC complex that is America, right? Like this red, white, and blue, back to back World War II champions. We've got the most powerful military on the planet. We've got all these amazing guys in special operations, blah, 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 right? Like that's a snuggly feeling and that's a
Yeah.
safety feeling. And there's a lot of people that would admit that they are addicted to safety. Whereas, that's when you start to peel it back and you start to introduce people to the idea that, hey, listen, I think between Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, I think we not only have the largest standing army in the world, but we've got the largest standing army in the world multiple times over. And so anybody that would ever think about invading this country, like what? What are you talking about? We couldn't take over Afghanistan. We got our asses kicked, out there in those mountains. Iraq was no picnic, and the other countries that we've gone into and been handed our ass over time. It's like, what do you think? Like those guys are going to be softer than the people here in the United States? Like this is that piece where a lot of what we've been indoctrinated with is just simply not true, and helping people find an escape route for that. Basically not your fault. You were indoctrinated at 5 years old by the state, as were your parents. And they didn't know better, right? Like they had no idea that this was happening. that's their out. And if you present them an out, it makes it much easier to make that transition over to a libertarian, voluntary, or even an anarchist type perspective.
So I'm actually definitely a Ron Paul libertarian as well.
Yeah.
Luckily, I was introduced to him in 2008. I wasn't old enough to vote at the time, um, but I paid attention. I noticed. I actually found him in a High Times magazine advertisement. It was like a half page advertisement, and it was a politician advocating for the full legalization and decriminalization of marijuana.
Yeah.
And I was taken back. I was like, man, that is political suicide, you know?
Especially back then in the GOP.
Yeah,
Say with me,
exactly.
standing there against the MIC, like
Yeah.
it was a real thing.
It blew my mind. And then that not too long after that, that's when I saw the Giuliani debate and Ron Paul saying that this is not why they hate us. And ever since then, that's all I needed.
Yeah.
I started paying attention more, of course, educated myself more. So, but it's just really interesting. I have a lot of Republican family, and I remember right after 9/11, it was a lot of red, white, and blue, or fuck you,
Yeah.
like that's it. And I do got to say there was something interesting because like it felt we were united, as a country after a common goal. But
Mhm.
looking back on it now, it was just like that's like the worst goal.
Yeah.
We could have been united.
Well, and and that's the thing too is, and I don't mean to shit on Christians, right? But there comes a point, and obviously, what I've learned since going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole is the GOP largely, especially here in the South, and I think in a lot of other places, is made up of a bunch of Christians. And one of the
Yeah.
main tenets of Christianity is not seeking revenge. Revenge is quote unquote the Lord's, right? Like that
Yeah.
is that is a giant tenet, and for us to be so vengeful, to want to go and go after these people, and that great old saying, if you seek revenge, dig two graves.
Yeah.
You're witnessing right now a country that was seeking revenge, that is now going to die an economic death.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, it probably is, it's probably going to balkanize at some point. It's going to decentralize to the point where DC is absolutely not taken seriously anymore, and left without power, no ability to tax, all of these things. And so not only, did we go over there and, do some just horrendous things to a couple of generations, but now we've done some really, really horrible things to the generations here. You look at the GOP and the vengefulness, and what happens because of that vengefulness in terms of not only spending, but loss of rights in terms of the Patriot Act, the NDAA. You look at the war on drugs. The
TSA.
weaponization, yeah, the weaponization of DHS, of the IRS, of the DEA, of the FDA, of the FBI, the CIA, all doing all of these things by taking your money and oppressing you with it. It is it's I mean, it's tragic. It's a tragic. I don't know, if you're a Marine, I guess a tragic comedy, because this is what you want to see. You want to see these monsters in DC and their bureaucrats and the bankers and their zombie corporations, and things like the MIC and pharmaceuticals and the rest of those kind of guys. You want to see them get their just desserts. But if we're still a path out without violence, let's take that path, right? Like, we don't
Yeah.
have to do anything. They're literally right now crumbling under their own weight of debt and lies and manipulation, and they're getting found out. And it's just like, just let them go. Just let the whole damn thing go and start working
Watch
locally.
it burn.
Yeah, here's some gas. I'm
Yeah.
not going to pour out, like, I'm not coming out there to do anything. All I'm going to do is sit back and say, this is the path. And until it gets to that point of, like, I don't know, real physical violence against most people, taking up arms against this collapsing empire, it's a non-starter.
So I obviously I am in favor of hardcore rebellion like that. However, I still don't feel like we're there. You know,
No.
I not saying we couldn't get there very quickly, but we're not. It's not like the revolutionary times where the redcoats are coming to burn cities down. You know,
Yeah.
like we're still pretty far off. However, one question I've been asking, and I've been trying to ask a lot of fellow libertarians or just anarchists, whoever I come across, is where the hell are all the rebels? Like, for the most part, where the hell are all the rebels?
So I think there's this one thing that I've learned, especially being in combat arms, is there's this um, when 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 you're trying to identify power, right? Real power. Power is quiet, and power is very still. It is one of those things that is patient, and it'll take as much as it takes. There's a good analogy about this with a male lion and his cubs. Those cubs that are his, will pounce on him, chew on his ear, chew on his tail, claw him, at some point when he's just tired of it, he'll stand up and it'll be over. And that's it. That point has not come yet, and that's the thing is, for guys like myself that are out there, and I'm going to tell you right now, there are millions of guys like me. It is, listen, I don't need to draw the sword yet. I still see outs. I still see a path of peace, and that's the real power. The guys that are out there, they're like, let's fucking go. Like, man, you probably never seen anything. And if they continue to go like that, they're not going to have, like, guys like me going, yeah, let's go, right? Even before we get to that point, is one of the things that we're working on here in Cherokee County is, we're assembling a bunch of good old boys, right? And I don't mind mincing words about this. If there are ladies who would like to join us that know how to handle themselves, great. But in terms of warriors, like, the warriors are getting together and they're having conversations, and they're coming up with a plan, a peaceful plan, but a show of force. And that show of force is, hey there, sheriff, you know these are our guys, and there's a choice coming for you between things like CBDCs and hard assets like Bitcoin or silver and gold, and we can pay you, we will pay you. Having a police force is not a bad thing, but it will be under a contract. And the only thing you're going to be doing is going after really heinous criminals, not, the people you're mad at, the people that are really violent. That's the people. And if that time comes and we need to round up really violent people, I think you got a whole posse here that's going to help you take care of business. Now, if you want to go the CBDC route and you're going to carry out any type of orders that they dangle in front of you so that you get paid in CBDCs, we're going to have a lot of issues, because at one point, if you roll one of us up, we're not coming for the deputies, we're not coming for the judge, we're not coming for the jailers, we're not coming for any of them. We are coming for you and you alone, and that is it. So when you deliver these kind of messages and you have these kind of tactics and you're still peaceful, and your last resolution is a warning, hey, leave us alone, leave the peaceful people alone, I think that's where the good old boy power resides. It's quiet, it's still, it's preparing, and when it has to act, it'll be over before it begins.
Yeah, that's well said, honestly. So there was a person here in the state of Utah. It's one of my favorite stories from the Libertarian Party. His name was Carl Bray, and he was the first chair of the Utah Libertarian Party. He was a co-founder of the national committee and everything. He used to dress up as Paul Revere and ride a horse through one of the parks downtown Salt Lake and hand out Carl Bray dollars because the Federal Reserve notes were going to be worthless one day.
Yeah.
And he was a tax rebel. He fought the IRS. He refused to pay his income taxes, and even one of the former governors of Utah backed him when he ran for office as a libertarian. And so obviously there's some rebels, and I do see them. And I think we are coming up on times like this where these types of voices are necessary. Those types of theatrics which are not empty, by the way. You know, they're not an empty threat by any means, but I think these theatrics are kind of necessary these days.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing is you have to remind these people. And the only thing that these people in government understand is force and coercion. That's it. That's all they understand.
Yeah,
It's how they live. They live off of force and coercion. So if you get to that point, which I think we're at, I think if we're not having these conversations with our local sheriffs and local mayors, we're behind the time. And the idea that you can do this still in a peaceful manner and not spark a violent revolution and give them an out, right? Like that's the art of war 101 is build your enemy a golden bridge of retreat. Look, man,
yeah.
we don't want this. We would love to have you as a better part of our community. We would love to improve the relationships between the deputies and the police and the local citizens. And the only way you're going to do that is you stop taking advantage of peaceful people. We're not your cash cow. Our property is not your property. Our property is our property. Now, if you want to sign a contract and you want to do this the right way, there's an out. There's a simple out for you. Is your department going to be as big? No. Is your jail going to be as big? No. You're not going to have to feed as many people. You're not going to have the government overlooking you. You're not going to have the FBI dangling carrots out in front of you and things like, for civil asset forfeiture and drug bust and all this other bullshit. Like, you're not going to have to do this kind of stuff anymore. The murders, the rapes, the coercion, the burglary, the vandalism. Yeah. Kidnapping, sexual assault. Like, this is what we're going to help you guys go after. It's going to make you guys safer in the long run because you're going to be dealing with less people. And you're also going to be dealing with the people that deserve wrath versus the people that are just trying to live their lives.
Well, it's going to make you heroes again, right? It's going to make the community look upon you in a favorable light instead of just the constant hate, which a lot of law enforcement seem to get these days. Which,
Well, rightly so. And that's the
yeah,
thing is when you're out on a major road, a main corridor for people that are traversing to their job in this economy, and you're looking at them for 9 over, 10 over, something like that, man, and then trying to escalate the situation when there's pushback, like there's a lot of IRE for a lot of good reasons. Um,
yeah,
I think last year, cops in America killed 1,100 people. Like, that's a lot of people, and
it is.
they're. I mean, most of them weren't, the gang banging, like, bullshit that they try to, tout, like crime is out of control. Yeah, crime is out of control. You guys are the ones who are committing it most of the time.
Yeah.
I'm going to agree with you there. I'm not going to agree with you on the subject or the fix. So yeah, rightful IRE, I think, and righteous IRE is definitely a good thing.
You know, I got to say, I'm a little pissed when the Supreme Court has ruled that police don't have an obligation to protect us, and yet we're still forced to pay for them. You
Yeah,
know?
that's a weird thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you guys should just be detectives then, and maybe you should
Yeah.
maybe you guys should tell everybody that you should probably be very armed and ready to go when shit hits the fan because we're a long ways away when seconds count, right? Like that's kind of
Yeah.
the whole narrative. Yeah, paying these guys for protection, or being made to pay these guys for protection is kind of a racket. It's like, all right, just be
Just mob
detectives.
stuff, you
Yeah,
know?
just be detectives, and at that point, when it's time to call the posse up to go round up the bad guy that did the murder or did the rape or whatever,
Yeah.
like, yeah, pretty simple fix.
So, kind of want to shift gears a little bit. I wanted to ask you about what you have going on with Brave and your PTSD experience that you have going on. Do you mind kind of running through the basics, like what it is, what you have going on?
Sure. So Brave is a mission that I put together. I was introduced to psilocybin a few years ago, and I grew up that kid that was like, on the dare teams and like all that kind of stuff, like not narking people out or anything like that, but one of those places where you'd attend something in elementary school, where cops would come in, they tell you about the danger of drugs, guys are
Been there.
probably yeah, guys that had probably never done drugs in the first place, especially not cannabis and psilocybin and things like that. Not to mention, like back in the day, you were getting things like Mexican ditchweed, which was like it's sticks and seeds and whatever else. And, sometimes it might have been laced with something, so that, the customer had, more of a high, right? More of an addiction or something like that, where they would continue to go back to a deal. Like, that's not the case these days. Like, the sophistication of these markets has grown. We've just seen study come out of was it Johns Hopkins? I think it was Johns Hopkins, on psilocybin and post traumatic stress. And so, read through this and saw some very, just outstanding results. Not just a majority, but like an overwhelming, part, like a 90% of the people said it was one of the top 5 or top 3 moments in their life in terms of a psilocybin trip. And you gotta
Wow.
be smart about this. So, when I went out with my shaman who I met through jujitsu, and, very intentional. He was like, "Look, man, you're here for a reason. I'm here for a reason. This is not a coincidence. This is going to, be, an amazing experience. I'm not going to tell you what it is, and, but we are going to be still, and we are going to be silent. We're going out in nature. We are going to do this the right way." And I was really like, it's one of those things where cannabis is one thing, right? Like, and I had gotten into the point where, I was trying to go on as large a trip as I could, even with edibles, so that I could go and, get into that, into the mystical part, the mystery part, right? Because things were unlocking for me. I was becoming a much more patient person, more patient dad, more patient husband because of this kind of stuff. I was just like, this is not what I was told what it was. It didn't make me dumb. Honestly, at the time I started, it was probably about, I don't know, 2015 sometime, right? And I started looking at this kind of stuff, and I was just like, boy, everything that I was ever told about, what this was is not only a lie, but it was an oppression, so that people, were not introduced to what the benefits of this were. Man, I think I found Brian Moraski's The Immortality Key at that point.
Mm, good
And
one.
yeah, man, what a powerful book. Um, and kind of was like, wow, like ancient civilizations have been doing this for 10,000 plus years. And now that I've seen, what Graham Hancock has been talking about, probably even longer than that, right? And it's so you see how this started, and what happened, and how they called it the glue of humanity, the ego death, where, it was this bonding ritual at harvest season, in the Mediterranean and a lot of other places through, the sub-Sahara desert in Africa, and then up into, the Germanic lands at the time. And you start to see, what really happened. You start to see that the church came in, gave us a placebo, and said, "Hey, man, this is Christ, and here's your placebo, and we're going to take all the power and give us your money, because that's what really evil organizations do. Deprive people of a communion with something mystical that is eye opening." And I mean that third eye opening type of stuff, where you go beyond the plane of whatever this is, right? And so, um, after my first trip, I was just like, wow, this is amazing. So my shaman, who is, he's a purple belt, and just one of the greatest guys in the world, right? Very dangerous man. Um, to take guys out that are warriors to do this kind of thing. He's like, you are the type of archetype that is perfect for this. And, when you start talking archetypes, you start to talk to guys that have been there and traveled, right? And so, this started to kind of like eat at me a little bit, and I was like, all right, if it's good for me, it's good for others, because guys that can control their mind, control their breathing, be still, and fight through this kind of stuff, and get that reset, and get that upload and the download into, this broader picture of what everything is. I was just like, man, this is so powerful, and the signal is clear. So I started taking some guys out, and we started working with psilocybin. And I'm telling you, I mean, this is something, that I understand very well now. I'm not a Christian by any stretch of the imagination. I grew up in the Christian faith, and I think that Jesus was a man that did some amazing things, but I think he did some things that were, very much with psychedelics. And
I would agree.
I think that that piece, that one missing piece that's been taken and oppressed from us is, the ability to go out and have these conversations. Because if you get a group of guys out and you have a good enough trip, and I'm talking, probably more like a hero's dose or bigger, like 5 grams, in the right conditions, in nature,
Yeah.
with good dudes that can fight through this kind of stuff and are there to support each other, the conversations you will have, the opening of your heart and your mind and your ideas, man, it is one of those things, like, you see, like, my eyes start to water just talking about it. It's one of those things where you can laugh and cry with full grown men about what's going on in their life, provide each other not only, a network of warriors, but you can also, give advice and skill sets, right? Because where, like, I'm this guy that is kind of a public figure, a lot of these guys are hunters, they're shaman, they're builders, they're, like, you start to see their gift is, what their passion is. And now all of a sudden, now they're starting to work towards those passions instead of like trying to chase the almighty dollar. And when people see that and they start working towards it and start, wanting to be independent and live a life, of peace and in nature and balance and all, like, that is not a people that government want, right? Like, that is a people that is very, very, very dangerous to a government that needs control of its people. Um, so Brave is just that, is, we take guys out, guys, we haven't taken any girls out yet. It's one of those things where, I traipsing off into the woods with females and, doing psilocybin. I think there's,
Yeah.
maybe as a group or something like that of, husbands and wives or whatever, at some point. But for what we're doing, we're building a warrior class, and we're building a family, and we're building a network, and we're building, stronger men with passion again, that are going to go out and evangelize. And one of
Yeah.
the coolest things about, all of this is, when you get down to it, you can't show people this. You can't take people, and be like, "Hey, here's some pictures, here's some video." You can't really give them that. Um, the only thing that remains that you can take out of these situations, and one of the questions I was asking myself during, one of these trips that I went out, 7 grams. I went out by myself into the mountains up here and sat,
Beautiful.
and oh my gosh, just unreal. But that's, you're going out hours before sunlight. And this is the way we do it. We go out hours before sunlight. And so it's dark for your trip. And there's bear, there's deer, there's, if you're not a comfortable outdoorsman, this is maybe not for you. Um, so you go out there, and as you're coming out of phase one, basically, and the sun's coming up and you're having that rebirth, right? Like, now things start to fall in line. You start to have these conversations not only with yourself, but these guys. And one thing, especially when you're by yourself, you're like, how do I take this to everybody else? What is the message I'm supposed to take? And what remains is love. That one word, go love people. Go show them, this, not this, go show them this. And when you can do that as, a guy that's been around and done some things, like, it changes your interaction, it changes the people around you, it changes your network. Because let's face it, like, I'm not saying that, we should live in a patriarchal, matriarchal, like, I don't care about any of those. There's this balance that comes about. And you see, especially your wife for who she is, you see your kids for who they're going to be, like version 2 of you, or the next version of whatever you are. And you start to see how it makes sense. So for me, like, the whole thing with Brave is, like, just go love people, like, go and show them how that is. And I'll tell you, it's even not more of a coincidence, but this book that I'm working on now, it's called The Communications Protocol. It's about not only communing with God, through psychedelics. It's about how we talk to each other, but it's also about how we talk and communicate and interact with strangers. And that piece right there, in a time where technology is changing fast, it's one of those things where Bitcoin is coming around. And when you understand Austrian economics and you understand that, Bitcoin takes this fiat bullshit system that's absolutely a cancer that's destroyed our entire society and our entire culture, you start to write that when people start to understand, like, listen, we can love each other as strangers. We can leave each other alone. And when we interact with each other, we can interact with each other through consent and peace through this technology. And so when you start to see all of these things kind of just line up, and I mean, this isn't the mind of some wild man. This is the mind of some guy who's gone out and had some psilocybin trips, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's very, very dangerous to the state. That is very dangerous to the banks, and it is super dangerous to the MIC and the pharmaceutical companies and the rest of the damn zombie corporations that are, going down the ESG route with these guys as well. So I mean, it's power. It is pure signal. It's power, and it is just, that's the brave mission: is how do we do this? How do we replicate this? And how do we make evangelists for this? That's
I
brave.
love that. I am a very strong proponent of psychedelics. It's always been my favorite personally, as an experiencer of these things. It's made through my experiences using psychedelics. It's made me more caring and loving. That there you see the when any sort of hippies like we're all one, man. We are,
Yeah.
and you can see it. And I don't like admitting that some of those people are right, but they're right, and there's a connection that you can't really see, but it's there. And
It's
leading
it's
with love, man,
yeah.
it's how I was able to come to terms and face that. And it definitely led me being more of a rebel for sure.
Yeah. No, and maybe one last story, because I got a hard go here in about 6 minutes.
No worries.
When when I was first, going in, right, and traveling, these trips would be, where there was a two-way communication, right? Like, I'm going in and I'm laying down some, like, this is my feedback to this, whatever it is. And it's got to be that two-way street, right? Like, we're out here for that reason. We're supposed to be, in this environment, and we're supposed to be relaying information back to the one, right? Like, hey, there we need to start listening. We need to start doing a better job of this kind of stuff. And I would go in, man, I just want to fight. I'd want to go into the system and just beat the shit out of it for how fucked up and corrupt it was, and how it corrupted me, and how it corrupted, everything that it touched. Like, I went in, like, hey, listen, this communications protocol is all fucked up. Like, you start to see it kind of like the Matrix, right? Like, you kind of start to see, like, that's an
Yeah.
archetype, that's an archetype, that's an archetype. This system is so screwed, or this system's amazing, whatever it was. And you're starting to say, this is what has to change. This is how it has to be. And when you can see people out there that kind of glow to you, right? Like, they just stick out like sore thumbs. You're like, that guy's coming, that guy's coming, that guy's coming, that guy's like, you're starting to do all this kind of stuff. I went in super hard, like, a lot of times, man. I was just like, I'm
Yeah.
going in and I'm going to beat the shit out of the system, and I'm going to like try to give it some better understanding. But then I got to that point where I was like, man, okay, message has been received. Now, when you go in and you slip in, and you're like, hey, everybody, peace. That is a different, like, there's this evolution, right? There's this evolution in your soul, in your mindset, in your heart, in your mind's eye, that now when you go in and you're like, all right, I'm done beating up the system. Like, I'm done. And now you slip in and you're like, hey, and you can actually, literally, you can feel everybody who's on a trip around the world right then. And it is one of the coolest experiences, to evolve in something new like this. And I'm excited. Like, I'm excited to see how this goes, to see how far we can push this, And I think this is one of those things that I think this is the awakening. I think this is where, very strong men and women, for that matter, because I hope women are doing this in groups as well as guys, right? Like, you get the right people, you get the right place, and you sit still and you do this the right way, and it will change your life. And you will look at situations, instead of wanting to run in and go to war, right? Like, go to battle, like, that's my
Yeah.
archetype. I'm a warrior. No, go in and say, "Hey, what's up?" Go make peace. Go expect the best in people. Give people the benefit of the doubt. And I mean, it's my own. Like, I think I said it during the debate. I said, it's not everyday people that go around murdering people. Like, that's the government. They're the largest mass murderer and the force and coercion agent in all of history. And so when you take your own advice and you're like, "Hey, man, let's go make peace. Let's not go make war. Let's go make peace with everybody. Let's show people what we're about. Let's show people that we're, good people, and that we, live by these aspects." Like, go take that into there. And
Yeah.
man, shit changes fast. It's amazing.
So I know you got to go. I don't want to keep you here too long. Thank you so much for coming.
Jacob,
Um,
I'm honored, man. Appreciate you having me, brother.
Anytime. I definitely want to get you back. One thing before we depart for this conversation, I love asking this question because I get a different answer every time. Why does liberty matter?
Oh man, great esoteric question, right? Liberty matters because you're a you're a thinking, thriving individual. You are part of the one, and at the same time, you're an individual. You are feedback, and you are passion, and you are genius, and you are here to lift humankind. You are here to lift the human condition. And if you cannot express and chase your passion, you cannot create your own genius, and you cannot lift humankind. Left to your own devices, liberty is the natural state. And that is, if we don't protect liberty, then we will never progress as a human species into a better place, without the wars, without the hate and the content, without all the malice and vengefulness and like all those things. Like, that's that's the purpose of liberty, to allow people to express themselves in the most peaceful way possible, to become geniuses, so that they can lift their fellow man.
That's great, honestly. Well, thank you so much, Shane. Do you got anything to plug where people can find you? What you have coming up?
Man, Brave, it will be a 501c3 here shortly, so I'm going to be going after a different path here with that, so that I can travel all over the place and make new evangelists. And any support at radicalpod.com in the meantime would be great. But you can find all my links and all that fun stuff there. I have a little bit of fun on Twitter. I've calmed down a little bit, not so ragey, but yeah, Jacob, really been a pleasure, man. And thanks for letting me open up about that kind of stuff, and the Brave mission, especially. It's one of those things that I'm extremely passionate about. Can't wait to get out around not only the US, man, hopefully the world at some point, and do some evangelizing.
Well, let's get you back on at some point, because I want an update. And anytime you can do anything for Brave or anything else here in Utah, just let me know, and I'll get you in contact with the people that will be able to best help spread this around.
Yes,
So
sir.
thank you so much again, and thanks for everyone watching. Hit that like, subscribe, share this. It helps grow the channel and everything else. And until next time, stay free, my friends.